When he was my age and I was already a boy, my father made a machine in the garage, a wired piece of steel with many small and beautiful welds, ground so smooth they resembled rows of pearls. He went broke with whatever it was. He held it so carefully in his arms. He carried it foundry to foundry. I think it was his harp. I think it was what he longed to make with his hands for the world. He moved it finally from the locked closet to the bedroom, to the garage again, where he hung it on the wall until I climbed and pulled it down and rubbed it clean and tried to make it work. So taking a comfortable seat, just setting your hands in that position of receptivity on your lap and devoting yourself to this practice for a half an hour. For a half an hour, just be willing to let everything else go, just as an experiment. And as we do, to just let everything soften. The cheekbones, the jaw, the back of the neck, forehead, the top of the head. Letting the shoulders fall. Just feeling them really soften. And when you do that, to straighten the back as best you can, even if by the smallest amount, and lengthen the neck by a millimeter. And as you're doing that, just put your awareness at the center of your forehead. We can put our awareness anywhere we want in our body. If you give it a try, put it in your right hand. And suddenly there it is. And now make it jump to your left hand. And there it is. We can do this for good and for ill. You can put your awareness on a painful area of your body and hold it there all day. And you're going to feel that pain and be aware of it. But we do have the ability to move the awareness around in our body. So for now, just put it at the center of your forehead. And then going down the torso, softening everything, letting the drawbridge down, sending all the guards away, all the archers, all the gladii. Softening the belly, which is the shield of protection and defense. Just feeling your whole body, the weight of your body against the earth, resting it there. Thich Nhat Hanh has this great passage from an interview where he talks about how a wounded animal or a sick animal knows to go off and rest and to do nothing, because doing nothing is the best way for the body to heal. How a sick animal knows what it needs. You could think of practice as a way wu wei, a doing not doing. And taking those deep breaths, breathing in to the count of 4, a little pause at the top, breathing out to 5. Maybe just breathing in our own weariness. And then releasing it. And if you're having thoughts flying through your head and getting caught up in them, I always say congratulations, because that's what you're here to notice. You just unvelcro yourself from the thoughts and step back from them and say, that's not me. I'm just watching these clouds pass by. The harp. When he was my age and I was already a boy, my father made a machine in the garage, a wired piece of steel with many small and beautiful welds, ground so smooth they resembled rows of pearls. He went broke with whatever it was. He held it so carefully in his arms. He carried it foundry to foundry. I think it was his harp. I think it was what he longed to make with his hands for the world. He moved it finally from the locked closet to the bedroom, to the garage again, where he hung it on the wall until I climbed and pulled it down and rubbed it clean and tried to make it work. I read this poem for the first time in 1987 in an anthology called the Morrow Anthology of Younger American Poets, which Bruce Weigl had assigned to our poetry workshop. It was the first poetry workshop I ever took, and I was using this anthology of wonderful poets, and here was my teacher included among them. And this was the first poem of his thousands of poems that I ever read. And I remember, like so many poems that I love, being confused by it, but at the same time, completely charmed. There was porousness, there was mystery, and yet there was incredible directness. Bruce always said, say it clearly and you make it beautiful no matter what. His straightforwardness, his wasting no time and getting to the point. These were the things that I noticed in his first poem, and they're the things that lasted all these years in my reading him. But in the poem, he never tells us what the father's machine is. It's something with welds that looks like pearls. And it's something he tried to sell. And he took it from foundry to foundry and nobody wanted it. So he put it away. And the son comes and takes it down and tries to make it work. And that's the whole poem. There's no explaining this dream to the analyst. We are the analysts and we have to explain it to ourselves. There are many ways of reading it. First, the formal reading is that the harp is poetry. Harp is the symbol of poetry. It was the instrument behind the 4 beats of the epic Anglo-Saxon line. You have the alliteration, you have the caesura in the middle of the line, you have the 4 beats, and then in the mead hall, when the poem was recited, you'd have this harpist going zing, 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 and keeping time. So the harp is the mood music of epic poetry. And if you look at the poem, there are these wonderful declarative sentences in the middle that are like zing, zing. He went broke with whatever it was. He held it so carefully in his arms. He carried it foundry to foundry. I think it was his harp. I can hear the harp in the syntax of this beautiful poem. The other reading, of course, is a psychological poem because it's about fathers and sons or fathers and children. My own father was nothing like me. I thought there could not be anybody who's less like me. He was athletic. He could fix anything. He climbed giant ladders to the tops of buildings. He seemed to have no fear. He always spoke his mind. He seemed to love conflict and to get into the tussle. He was nothing like me. And yet, all these years later, I look back at my father and I say, he's everything like me. He could look at something upside down and say, oh, I see how this works. And even though I don't have machine knowledge, I have a different kind of knowledge, which is what I ended up doing with my life, looking at poems upside down. People push them across the table, they're upside down. And I look at them and I say, oh, I think I know how this works. I think I know how I can help you. But my own father, he wanted to heal and repair things. And I think that that's what I took down from the wall and tried to make work. He was a vehicle of Tikkun Olam. He wanted to repair the world. And Bruce was another kind of father to me who was exactly the same, incidentally. He was a Vietnam veteran. He was a giant man. I think he was 6'4" when I met him. He was exactly like my father in so many ways. And it could be that that's what drew me to him. And he wrote narrative poems that told stories, and the stories drew you in, and they were intense. And then here I am, a French symbolist, entering his class, an unknown yet French symbolist entering his class. But I did take something down from that wall too, and try to make it work. And it was this idea of say it clearly, and you make it beautiful no matter what. That's what I took down from Bruce's wall, and I still value that so much. And I think in a poet's life, and everybody in the room here who's a poet can say what they think about this. All the young poets say to the old poets, "Oh, I see what you're doing, but I know a better way." And we all, as Bruce says in the poem, we all go broke with whatever it was. We all give that a try and end up learning for ourselves that there's an experience of recognition. There's a feeling of never quite getting there because words are themselves broken. We put this machine together with things that can't quite describe what we want to get to. yet we all give it a try, and it takes us to that moment of recognition. That's the beautiful thing about poetry. It could just be the giving in to the brokenness. The other reading, of course, is sociological because it's about the gap between Bruce's generation and his father's generation. Bruce was a hippie, and his father was of the generation before that. He was the first generation to protest the war, and his father was in World War II. So there's a locking of heads between these two figures. We see that the son sees that the father suffered, and the son is trying to learn from the father's mistakes and errors. And the son is going to have to learn on his own the other side of that coin. But we bring the four Brahma Viharas with us in those kinds of relationships where people are coming from different worlds and we're trying to understand them. We bring friendship and compassion and encouragement and equanimity or repose, the accepting of what we know and the letting go of what we don't know. And that seems to be what he's doing in this poem. There's a real love for the father, even though he didn't quite get what the father was after. The last reading, to the reading I love, is the mythological reading. He's stealing the harp. It's a Jack and the Beanstalk story, or it's a Promethean story too, where Prometheus steals fire from Zeus. He takes the harp down and he tries to put it to its proper use. So I'm reading this poem and I see that the father is trying to sell that harp from foundry to foundry. And when he can't do it, he puts it away. He puts his light under a bushel. And the son comes in and says, no, I'm going to clean it up and I'm going to make it work for the right reasons, which is just to make a beautiful sound unto itself. So there again is that recognition that the harp is really for nothing but its own beauty. Here's the poem again. When he was my age and I was already a boy, my father made a machine in the garage, a wired piece of steel with many small and beautiful welds, ground so smooth they resembled rows of pearls. He went broke with whatever it was. He held it so carefully in his arms. He carried it foundry to foundry. I think it was his harp. I think it was what he longed to make with his hands for the world. He moved it finally from the locked closet to the bedroom to the garage again, where he hung it on the wall until I climbed down and pulled it down and rubbed it clean and tried to make it work. Let's go back into it. Heading into that position again, closing your eyes if you feel comfortable. And I just want to ask you, how have you, consciously or unconsciously, been taking your own heart foundry to foundry and going broke with whatever it was? How have you, unconsciously or consciously, put your harp away? Breathing that question in, maybe with no answer at the present moment, but just breathing it in to the count of 4. Breathing it into the count of 4. And now to the count of 5. From a Buddhist perspective, the harp is the Buddha nature. Thich Nhat Hanh says, the Lotus Sutra says, all sentient beings have the Buddha nature, Buddhata. With the right conditions, the seed of Buddha nature will grow. To practice means to help that wonderful seed manifest. To practice is to put your own harp to work, is to clean it up and to try to make it work. The harp is exactly the way Buddha nature is described. It stays golden no matter what we put on top of it. The practice is to take it out from under its bushel. And the practice is to give it away to the world rather than to try to sell it foundry to foundry and go broke with whatever it was. That's a deep teaching that I'm getting from this poem. The other side is to think of the harp of someone who has passed in your life, maybe years and years and years ago, since we're on the cusp of All Saints' Day. And to use the Brahma Viharas to wave to them. What was it that they went broke with? And you start with metta in friendship. Bruce says, I think it was what he tried to make for the world. What a beautiful gesture. What a statement. You might just say to that person who has passed, I see what you tried to make for the world. And the next immeasurable is compassion, an earnest wish to relieve their suffering. Bruce says he went broke with whatever it was. I see how you were hurt by what you tried to do. The next immeasurable, or Brahma Vihara, is encouragement. It's mudita, where you just celebrate the gift they tried to give the world. Bruce describes the welds like pearls. It was a beautiful thing that his father made, whether he sold it or not. You just say, I see the triumph and the beauty of that work and that struggle. The last is upekkha, or equanimity. Rilke calls it repose. We just look at what we know and what we don't know. And that's just what Bruce does. He says, I think it was, and whatever it was, he's using that kind of language to acknowledge that there's a lot about this person's life that he'll never know. So we say to those that we wave to, I don't know the whole story. I hold the harp lightly in my arms. I hold it like a baby. Just one more time, softening everything. It takes a lot to wave to the dead. So you have to be nice to yourself. Softening the shoulders, the muscles of the face, the lids of your eyes. Throwing open the doors of the heart. Softening the belly. The Harp by Bruce Weigl. When he was my age and I was already a boy, my father made a machine in the garage. A wired piece of steel with many small and beautiful welds, ground so smooth they resembled rows of pearls. He went broke with whatever it was. He held it so carefully in his arms. He carried it foundry to foundry. I think it was his harp. I think it was what he longed to make with his hands for the world. He moved it finally from the locked closet to the bedroom to the garage again, where he hung it on the wall until I climbed and pulled it down and rubbed it clean and tried to make it work. Thank you, everybody.